Do you see the things I
Hey,
see?
Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be taking a look into S-Layer. We're going to be looking at the modulation capabilities as well as the scenes down here at the bottom. Let's go with scenes first because they're very straightforward. So we have here the ability to trigger 8 scenes. A scene is just a collection of parameters that you have created in S-Layer. As you see, as I swap between them, it changes the parameters. So I'm able to save basically a drum kit up to 8 sounds. It is monophonic, so it will pick one scene. It does not play back 2 scenes at the same time. And what's cool about this is I'm able to trigger this with a keyboard. And this keyboard right here, as you see, if I have it lit up, that means my keyboard's active. So when I hit keys starting from C3 up, it will change the scene. So if I hit C3, so I'm just hitting keys up chromatically and it's triggering them. Oh, that's a very nice sound. And if I turn this off, it will stay on that. But you notice if I turn this off, the transpose button lights up. So turn it off. Whoa, look at that. If I turn it back on, oh, it turns off, and vice versa. So this is the transpose mode. So now let's pick a different sound. Let's go with that one. If I go to transpose, what it's going to do is it's going to stay on that scene and it's going to pitch that sample up and down the keyboard as I play it. So pretty cool, handy dandy tricks there. We also have the ability to copy and paste scenes. So let's say I want to copy scene 1 and put it on scene 8. Well, I can if I hit paste, and you see, bam, it now matches the settings. So if you quickly want to duplicate scenes, this is a great way of doing it. Now, there is this little lightning bolt here. What this does is if you're experiencing clickles, cracks and pops and things of that nature while you're trying to record and such, you can click this. And this is not a feature I really use, but from what I understand, it introduces some latency and helps you overcome those sorts of problems. You can research that feature more if you want. Maybe you're in a much more intense project. So let's go ahead and jump into the modulation. So what we have here is we have A, B, C, D underneath our parameters that we've covered. But if we go over into effects and envelope and external, we see that these, well, with the exception of the envelope, but we see that these appear here, A, B, C, D. What does this mean? Well, this allows you to link up the parameter that this is controlling to an internal sequencer. And so we see here underneath modulation, we have sequencers and we have wrappers. Sequencers are viewed in 2 ways. You can view it as a sort of a sample and hold type sequencer, a step sequencer, where it goes through and it reads the value and then it reads the next value and then it reads the next value. Or you can turn on what's called smoothing. Smoothing will put a glide between the values. So as opposed to it being value, 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 it would go, oh, increasing to this value, decreasing to that value. You know, it look more like a wave, whereas the one would be like step, 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 step of a sample and hold sort of vibe. So that's what that does. And we can use these internally generated things to control these parameters. So what we need to take note of here is there's this little blue bar that indicates the value that's currently being read out. And when you let go of the envelope, it will continue to read out that value. It will stay at that value. It's not going to move on. That way your parameters aren't all of a sudden going and changing when you let go of notes and stuff. They'll stay at the value that you had them at. Now, this blue bar, if I hit a note, it begins to move. We give it a range by clicking and dragging. You see this little gray box appears, and I can confine it to an area. So you see it only scrolls now in that little area. Or I could have it be the whole thing and just double click to do that. So we have 4 of these, and we're able to do things. We're able to copy and paste and flip them if you want. So we can flip. We also can randomize it. So here we got some randomizing. Here we have this is much more of just a random sample and hold type deal. Then we have a sine wave, square wave, a triangle wave, and a saw wave. If we come over here to the triangle wave, we can take note of the bend feature. So the bend feature is by default at a value of 50. If we move it, it will bend our waveform. So kind of an interesting deal. Yep. And if we can also randomize this, by the way, if you hook this up right by using the orange dot, we know that all orange dots are indicated that you can randomize it by hitting the random button. And you see it's moving our sequencer around. So kind of an interesting deal. Now you can double click, by the way, to reset the bend value as well. Or you can click and drag to just change the value. We have the smooth, which we already talked about, but let's visually show you what this can do by hooking it up to something. So let's hook up modulation A to the pitch. So we're going to hook it up to the pitch, and we immediately see, and I'm going to unlock this top one. We immediately see that there are these little gray bars that appear on each sample lane. And as I click, we see it moves, and they're quite slow. They're very smooth because it's interpolating between our sample points. If I hit not smooth, they become much more clicky. They're reading the value, and so there's a bunch of instantaneous change. If I do something like this will be much more obvious what's going on here. And so you see it clicks back and forth. But if I were to do that same thing with smoothing on, you see it is much smoother. It's still quite fast, but it's a lot smoother. We also have speed, which is the rate at which this thing scrolls through. So right now it's 16th notes. We can change it to 8th notes, for example, and go back to 16ths. Bum, bum, bum. We also have the ability to loop, and so this will play through to the end, and then it will stop as such, or we can have it loop. And again, when it stops, it's going to stay at that value. So that's an important thing to just be aware of. And we're also able to just straight up turn it on or off. Now it's reading out this value right now. So if I were to hit another note, it would re-trigger it and it would continue playing on its way. But this also makes it so that when you let go of a note, if whatever happens, maybe you have this hooked up to like your panning or pitch or something, your sound doesn't suddenly change. Because, right, if you reset back to the beginning, it might be a different value. So, okay, cool. So that's what these things do. And we're able to hook these up dynamically to these. Now you might be saying, what's the deal with these spread and slide options? Well, spread, let's put this on a sine wave. Spread will take the value given, and we see that each one of these we know that these are samples, right? Well, we can spread out the values given to the sample. So instead of them having all being uniformly affected, we can turn up the spread, and we see that the values begin to shift through time. It's skewed the values that it's giving in an organized fashion. So before it was just all this one value, now they've been skewed across the waveform. And if we play, we see that it maintains this relationship. So you can get some really interesting effects that way because, every sample is its own sound, so why not vary a little bit more? We're also able to introduce slide. What slide does is it takes the values that we have here, and if we give it a new value, you see it changes to that value quite quickly. And if we were to play through and be like, oh, here we are, and we hit a new note, it quickly snaps to that one. Maybe that's an undesirable thing that we don't want. Maybe we want it to be a little bit smoother. We can turn up slide. Now it will actually take its time gliding to the new value. So you see here, it takes quite a bit longer because I've given it a long slide time. If I give it a very short slide time or no slide time, it'll just immediately, boom, it's there. But otherwise, we can make it take its time getting there. And so if I move this slide too, it's pretty obvious that there's a delay between it's gliding to the new value versus no slide. It just, bam, there it is, versus this nice, wonderful gliding. So that is the sequencers. I'm wearing a hat. Let's jump over to the wrappers. So what the wrappers are, they are a more direct way of controlling the way you can scroll through these parameters. So right now, we kind of have this random, and we have these abilities to link up sequencers. And the more I think about it, I think if you put multiple modulation sources on something, I think it may wrap around in a similar fashion to what the wrappers do. Meaning, when you scroll, you're able to scroll through values, and you can increase them incrementally as you scroll up in a very controlled fashion. And once they reach, you see this one's about to max out. As it maxes, it goes bam, back to the beginning, and thus that's why it's called a wrapper. It wraps around. And so you're able to take these and control it in a much more direct fashion, but in a group fashion still. So you're still able to grab it as a group. If we notice here that we're able to also freeze as we did before. So we're freezing the parameters just the same with the wrappers. Now, we see that we only have 4, and they are linked. If we see here, they have the name of the parameter they're controlling. So sample, this one start, delay, all that stuff. If you want to select a different one, you can click from the drop-down menu and select one. You see here that we have the 4 parameter pages. And if we were to scroll through here, we see like, oh, there's effects, envelope, and external. Now, you can't hook up sequencers to the parameter page for this, but you can hook up wrappers. So if we set this to attack, we can actually control the attack of the envelope, which is a really cool idea. So that's the wrappers. That's what they do. That's the modulation. I mean, that's the stuff. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.